15 minutes and maybe a little bit more. Our next speaker is Garabet Moumdjian, who's going to talk about Sultan Abdulhamid and the Armenian Question revisited.
First of all, sorry that I was a little bit today. I didn't feel well, but now I'm feeling well, so it's okay in that sense. The most important problem that a diplomatic historian faces is that he can't editorialize, or he can't put much of his thoughts into what he's writing. The issue is that you have to present facts, and also the best you can do some conclusions at the end. So this is one of the limitations that a diplomatic historian has when he's dealing with issues that are very complex in terms of ethnic, social, and other factors that are taken into the equation. The other problem that we have in this case, as is the case in the Balkan people, is how to make sense of divergent historiographies. And as I was hearing the papers presented yesterday, I was trying to find out if there is the possibility, and I think I am a little bit positive in that regard, because I saw some possibilities in terms of being able to integrate divergent historiographies and bringing them into a single new paradigm that would be a rewriting of the history or the histories, in a sense, of the peoples that we are dealing with. There are some unknown facts that have to be mentioned here regarding the Armenian issue in general, and those are one of the issues that have to be taken into consideration by a new generation of Armenian, Turkish, and other historians who are dealing with the subject, is to really assess what the Armenian revolutionary movement was really about. One of the problems that exists, that we interchangeably use terms like Armenian nationalism and also Armenian independence within the context of events that have come later. Like, for example, when we speak about Armenian nationalism and Armenian independence aspirations, just after the Treaty of Berlin, that would be a problematic utterance, because at that time there was no such thing. Even in 1918, for example, when the First Republic of Armenia was established, the people who were there were really astonished of what would they do in such a case, because independence came to them from the sky. They were not ready for it. So we have to take this into consideration. This also brings forth another issue which is important, is that the revolutionary movement itself, or the players in the revolutionary movement, what was their real aim? We can categorize issues in here in terms of revolutionaries who were coming from an Eastern or Russian Armenian milieu, and revolutionaries who were local products from the Ottoman Empire. There were some differences between the thinking of both parties. The ones that were coming in from Russia had the Russian revolutionary zeal of the Narodniks in them, and also a very strong sense of leftist, let's say socialist agenda. While in reality, the local product, the revolutionaries that were the locals to Eastern Anatolia, were more of a pseudo-nationalist, let's say, complexion in terms of wanting to preserve the local way of life, and also be able to live in a situation where, unfortunately, as Dennis was and I heard the last part of his presentation, they were living in a milieu where it was not conducive for a city-dweller Armenian population within the context of a tribal, Kurdish, or even Circassian milieu. That was one of the issues that we have to take into consideration. The other problem is that there are some sort of generalizations that historians have been using since the 1960s. For example, if it comes for the issue of Armenian nationalism, I wouldn't know if anybody would not use Nalbandian as his important source, even though Nalbandian wrote his book in the 1960s, and it totally needs a revision, or at least we have to come up with a new pattern in which to explain more complex issues rather than Nalbandian in his very linear approach to the issue in general. The other problems that I see is that there is little understanding in terms of the Armenian demands for reform, because it goes side by side with the issue of Armenian nationalism and aspirations towards independence. Because as a matter of fact, during the period that we are speaking about, it is a reform-driven zeal rather than an independence-driven zeal. And as a matter of fact, people have to be very realistic in these days, because we are not speaking about, look, and this brings forward a very important issue. What was happening in the western periphery of the empire was not the same as what was happening in the eastern periphery of the empire. You have in the western periphery, you have Romania and the Balkans in general. But even if you take the Balkans as a geographic entity as a whole, it would not fit into one of the vilayets of Eastern Anatolia. So we are speaking here about, and this is important in what Dennis was saying, vast geographical areas as versus very narrow geographical areas with very dense populations. In the eastern villages, the Armenians, Kurds were living there, but there were no dense populations in those areas. In the Balkans, you have very dense populations. And also in terms of revolutionary zeal and revolutionary activity, it was very easy in the Balkans to procure weapons and military supplements because of the routes, smuggling routes, and the shortness of those distances, and also the possibility of bringing everything from Europe. But in the case of the Armenians, you had to smuggle those things and bring them through a very vast geographical area, and there were lots of cases where they were caught doing so because they were going through enemy territory, in a sense. If we are going to speak about the Kurdish areas from which those things were coming into Armenia. However, if we go back to the issue of Berlin and speak about what was happening there, apparently one of the issues that I am trying to deal with is, and this has some social implication, is that there are two issues I want to just bring here. One of them is that maybe the Balkan people were more fortunate in terms of bringing about their national movements not a little bit earlier, much earlier than the case of the Armenians. We start with the Greeks in the 1820s and then go all the way up to the other people, which culminated in the Berlin Treaty, in some of them even getting independence. This was not the case with the Armenians. So there are two things I want to mention. One of them is, there is a Turkish saying which says, "Pay verene pay kalmaz." And this was the case most probably that the Ottoman Sultan was looking into the issue. In terms of the translation, a rough translation would be, he who gives shares doesn't have shares at the end. So the Ottoman Empire and the Sultan in this case was very wary of the situation that if I give everything, I won't have anything left for me. In the case of Armenians, this became very important because it was the time that Armenians had started asking for a share, and that share was not there anymore. Nobody was going to give it to them. This is one of the interesting things that we have to look into it. Now, the other issues that I want to mention, and I'm going to go very fast so that I can put everything within the time limit that I have. There are some issues that we have to take into consideration. One of them is the very seldom mentioned issue of Abdulhamid going into direct negotiations with the Armenian revolutionaries, and in this case especially the Tashkents. This was a very complex negotiation process. It took about 3-4 years, and it happened in Geneva through the offices of one of the amiras who was acting as the vice foreign minister of the Ottoman Empire, Mihran Dadyan Pasha. Now, the negotiations were complex and didn't reach any place because Abdulhamid had one pattern by which he was dealing with all the revolutionaries, not only Armenians but also the Young Turk revolutionaries. He had one offer to them: come back, I will give you a salary, you will sit and have a very good life, but don't go into politics anymore. That was the case. And the only case I know who accepted the situation was Mizanji Murad Bey, who came from Paris and then went into obscurity because of the situation. But I think he had a very good life at the end because of the situation that he accepted the bribe that was given to him. So this is one of the, because Abdulhamid was not approaching the issue from the point of view of really finding solution to the problem. He had just one pattern and was using that, and it didn't work. Another issue that we have to think about, and Brad just touched about that and mentioned here, is the case of the Amira class. Now, the Amira class in Istanbul was the most influential Armenian class, and it was somehow the representative of the Armenians within with the Sultan, or the government of the Sultan. Now, the problem is that, and Arabs probably will speak about this at length, so I'm not going to delve into it, that in the 1860s, with the promulgation of the special constitution for the Armenian Millet, there was a problem in terms of the Amiras losing their power, and they knew not only Esnaf, by the way, the Esnaf were very important, but also the intelligentsia were the ones, the driving force behind this new situation where they wanted to take the power from the Amiras. But this also created another problem that we don't take into consideration, or we start or tend to forget about it. Now, look at the case of the Amiras. Who are they? They are the Sarrafs, and they are some of the wealthy Armenians. Where are they getting their wealth, or what is the business they are in? They are in the timar business, tax collection. How? By proxy. A Turkish Aga or a Turkish Pasha comes and buys the timarlık of a certain area. He doesn't have the money. Who is supplying the money to this person? The Armenian Sarraf, and sometimes the Greek Sarraf. But the extent to which the Armenian or the Jewish, the Greek or the Jewish Sarrafs are doing is nothing compared to what the Armenian Sarraf class or the Amira class is doing. Now, come Tanzimat, centralization. What happens to the taxation system? The taxation system is centralized, and who is now going and collecting the taxes from the provinces? The members. Now the Turkish Pasha is losing his job, and also at the same time the Amira class is losing its job. The Amira class's influence is based on its financial strength. Once you take that financial strength from the Amira class becomes impotent in a sense. And this is what we haven't taken into consideration, because if the Amira class was still a very vibrant and important class within the context of Ottoman Armenians, I don't think that the issues that went so far sometimes could have gone so far, because there would be possibilities to work with. And this is in terms of, I'm saying this in terms of ideas throwing in terms of revisionist historiography in this case. Coming back to the issue of the Kurds, unfortunately, this is something that we have taken for decades, and have some understandings which are very dogmatic, and we keep those until today. There is a problem in terms of the Kurdish people and their tribal way of life not being commensurate with the settled Armenian and even the Turkish way of life in Anatolia. It is very important to note that even though Armenians were suffering under the Kurdish Agas and Beys and their nomadic way of life, but I bet you, if you go and look at the sources, that at the same time, even the Turkish peasants were being maliced against by the same Kurdish